Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for taking out your day to join us for our live event. My name is Mark Hudson, CEO of Squirrel 365, and today I'm joined by my colleague Mel Shepherd, our Chief Experience Officer. We're recording this live event and it will be available for you all later today. Please feel free to use our chat panel to introduce yourself and your organisation and ask any questions. So let's get started. I'm sure many of you have experienced frustration when using an app or a website where things just don't work or behave as you'd expect them to. So how do you make sure that your applications, your dashboards, your interfaces that you're creating are intuitive, enjoyable, easy to use, and don't leave users frustrated? Well, the good news is there are some simple rules that you can apply during the interface design process to help you achieve this. And with the help of Mel Shepherd, our CXO, we're going to see what these are today. Mel, over to you.
Excellent, thanks Mark. Hi everyone. So just to further introduce myself, Mark's done a great job already, but I'm Mel, Chief Experience Officer here at Squirrel 365. And a little bit about me, my background is in IT. So I've held a number of technical roles in the past, but in each of those roles, I've always enjoyed simplifying complex things, and that extended to processes and to interfaces too, which then ultimately led to kind of developing a real passion for user experience and interface design. So I have to explain that I work with a team of very talented people. So we have designers, copywriters, developers, and my job really is just to kind of blend the technical and the creative together to craft great looking, usable, enjoyable digital products. Kind of like I see it as the magic sauce, I suppose, where we kind of really sprinkle UX over everything and can make a big difference. And in during the course of the roles that I've held, there are kind of some key tips for designing better interfaces that I think is a really great idea to kind of share with everybody else, as I certainly struggled with the kind of the design and the aesthetics side of interfaces and digital product design in the early phases. And I've learned a lot from my design team, and I think it's great to be able to share this now. So we're going to take a look at some of these tips. Right, so initially, we can break these 5 tips out into the following. So we'll cover off these things. So we're going to be talking about using proper space and alignment, creating a visual hierarchy, learning to love typography. I'm not sure about that one. Just caring about typography would do. Learning to love it is probably the next level. The kind of the design team would go that way. Understanding affordance and friction, and picking the right UI element. So let's dive straight in and talk about proper space and alignment first. So it's amazing how often alignment and spacing gets overlooked in an interface. So particularly when something has been created quickly and more attention has been given to its functionality. So it's one of the easiest things that you can do, though, to bring a bit of polish to your design, and it just looks kind of a bit messy and perhaps a little bit more unprofessional if you don't kind of give it the attention that it deserves. So how do we do this? How do we make lining things up easier and sorting out the alignment? Well, there's a couple of things we've got. There's kit in our tool bag, if you like, to help us with this. So we've got grids. So most of the tools that you'll be using to kind of build application interfaces will have, any front end you're working with will have the concept of a grid, even if that's kind of programmatically with the concept of grids with CSS and Flexbox and stuff. But if you're using a no-code tool, then very likely you'll be able to use grids to help you lay it out. So we definitely want to be doing that. We want to use the grid to position things nicely and use those alignment tools that are provided in the product or the tool as well. So we should be thinking about aligning lefts, tops, distributing it evenly. They help you to get the alignment right with a single click. So we should be using those in distribution tools as well. So evenly spacing things out, that will make a big difference in your design. The tools are all there to be used, and there's really no excuse for not doing it. But as I say, when the emphasis is on functionality and getting something out, it can get overlooked. So examples of alignment then. So here we can see on the left, we've got a a mocked up UI, I suppose. It's just kind of containers and a button, but we can very clearly see the poor alignment and distribution is evident here. And then with just a kind of a few changes, we can be looking at good alignment and distribution with not much effort at all over on the right hand side. So that first example is of course exaggerated, but it does show how sloppy something can look when we don't pay attention to it. And the second example there, nice and tidy with even distribution and alignment. So that's all very well in theory. Let's have a quick look at how we can actually do that. So I'm going to be using Squirrel 365 here, which is a no-code development tool or platform. But really the things that I'm showing you here, the tips and tricks, are common across any of these platforms at all. But if we have a look, I'm going to bring in a file that is reminiscent of that left-hand image we saw on the previous slide. Okay, so here we go. Let me just hide some of this stuff so you can see the whole thing. So just some boxes and a button. Nothing groundbreaking here. But I just want to look at how we can potentially tidy this up quite quickly using the functionality available to us within the tool. So first thing that I'm paying attention to here is the fact that we've kind of got an element that's butting right up against the top. That displeases me, so we'll bring that one down, just create ourselves a little bit of space. And then here, these look fairly equally sized, these boxes, but you can see that this one's narrow and stuff. So what we probably want to do is kind of evenly size those. So we can do that by setting the widths and the height to be the same on all of them, or I've got an option available to me here to say make all of those the same size. Now that they're all the same size, I don't know if you can see it, just very subtly, that one's a little bit lower, I think. It's Y position 88. Oh, both of those two are a little bit lower than that first one. So if we take that first one, what we're really looking for here is something like a reference point. So if we position this one where we want it, and then we can say actually align all the tops of these to be the same. And we also probably want those evenly distributed. So again, with a reference point, if we think about our left-hand edge, we've got a margin over here and a margin there, and we want those to be even. We want kind of the same size margin either side. So if we kind of set ourselves to say, actually, we want some space around this, it's probably going to be something like that. But let's now take these and say, not only line up their tops, because I moved one again, but also evenly distribute those. And now we know we've got equal spacing between those containers there. It's starting to look better in the top area already. Again, taking this left-hand edge as our reference point, let's line the rest of the content up to that. And then the next problem area I'm seeing is we've got not enough space between these items here. So if we align these, give us our right-hand edge. And then I'm just going to need to adjust my sizing here to make sure that and I'm just doing this by eye at this stage, visually looks about the same. And we want to make sure those line up at the top. And it's starting to look a lot better already. Let's make the height of those objects the same as well. It's already looking tidier. And then what have we got down here? We've got a button and something else. So I'm not overly worried about maintaining the same gap. And we're sort of enforcing a visual hierarchy, which we'll talk about in a second between those. I think it's fine to have this sort of sit on its own, but I would want that either probably centered vertically against this container and horizontally against this one, or you could possibly align the edge as well. So we can see using the options available to us within the tool that we can quickly and easily line something up a bit better. I'm a little bit offended by that, so I would probably potentially sort out that container spacing as well more accurately than I've just done. But what we're looking for is kind of even margins. We've got a discrepancy here between the top and the bottom, so I might actually pull this one down. Again, just visually to have that look a little bit more balanced. We've also got in our kit options available to us to turn on a grid. And as I say, this is the grid I was talking about that you'll see in a lot of the tools that are available to you. And that helps you just to kind of visually lay things out and aligning them. And you know, kind of instead of relying on the tools a bit, you can do it by eye. Many of the tools, it will snap to the grid as well. Another quick tip on the alignment side of things is you've got an option here with most of the tools. If you hold down Shift and move, you're moving kind of in incremental jumps predetermined for you in terms of pixel jumps, and that can help you to make sure you're getting alignment correct. If you just always nudge something down by Shift and the arrow keys, then you'll know you're getting equal spacing. So a few simple things we can do there really to sort out the alignment in any kind of web page interface, dashboard, whatever we might be building in terms of that visual front end. Okay, so we talked about alignment, but what about white space? We know we could line things up now, but how do we give it room? So white space is something that often gets overlooked. How do we see content butting up against each other far too much in the UI or touching the edges, and that's something we need to avoid if possible. White space is not necessarily white. It basically just means negative or unused space. So how do we get some white space in there? Well, we can consider grouping items using space. So we don't need to always be thinking about putting borders or boxes around things. We can be generous with our margins. You wouldn't read a book where the words went right up to the edge. So why do we expect users to read stuff where you know, elements are touching the edge of the screen? And we don't need to feel like we need to fill up all the space that's available. We just need to reevaluate whether these elements and items are really essential. And also something for mobiles to consider: hit areas. So we need to leave sufficient space, sufficient gaps around things to ensure that you know, kind of our fingers can prod stuff, which is quite different approach to when we're talking about using a cursor. So basically just let it breathe. There's no shame in having a lot of space, and just helps people to kind of consume the information and navigate their way around the UI really. So here's an example of a dashboard, actually, dashboard design that has plenty of white space. There's no need for borders, as we say, around every chart, as the space between those charts creates that invisible border for you. There's also generous margin around the edge of the dashboard, which helps to make it feel less cluttered. So in summary, don't be afraid of white space. It's as essential as kind of the design and the content in that page or that screen itself. So that was tip one. Tip two then is all around creating a visual hierarchy. So let's start by looking at what we mean by visual hierarchy. Visual hierarchy helps to influence the order in which the human eye perceives what it sees. So what this essentially means is it's about creating a design that ensures that the most important things stand out and the less important things don't. So when we're thinking about visual hierarchy, the first thing to consider is the position of our stuff, for want of a better phrase. So in the Western world, we read from left to right and we kind of zigzag down in a Z pattern. And this absolutely applies to web pages, dashboards, interfaces, screen design as well. So the Z pattern creates 4 key areas, or quadrants, if you like, where eyes will naturally stop and scan the information. And knowing this can help us to position the important things in the right place. So in terms of positioning, the top left corner of your interface, where we have the number 1 there, is the best location for your most important piece of content or data, or the thing that you want your users to notice first. As this is where your eyes, the user's eyes will start, and they'll linger at that point the longest. How else can we do it? There's much more than just position in terms of creating that visual hierarchy. So we also need to consider things like scale. Our brains naturally notice big things first, and therefore if you make something larger, it will draw users' eyes to it before they notice anything else. Proximity, things placed close together are typically seen as related or grouped. So space between objects helps to define them as being unrelated, just as the lack of space between objects defines them as related. Color, applying a bright color to an element will make it stand out against other neutrally colored objects. And contrast could be giving something a different shape or color, or making some text bold. Anything that disrupts a regular pattern will create contrast and therefore add hierarchy. And then naturally combining any of these will increase the hierarchy even further. So example, if you made something large and red, it would certainly grab attention on the page. So examples of visual hierarchy. We've got a weak visual hierarchy on the left. Everything's about the same size. We're not seeing really any use of color or scale in there. And we've got a strong visual hierarchy on the right, which does use scale, proximity, color to draw your eye to the important content. But if we kind of go too over the top with this stuff, if everything is shouting for our attention, then nothing will be heard, and it can be overwhelming and unhelpful. So creating a good visual hierarchy is all about giving the right amount of emphasis on each element. And a great way to check if your design has a good visual hierarchy is to do the squint test. So if we squint at these, I have a mental image now of everybody at home squinting at their screens. But if you squint at those, right to closing your eyes, right to the point where stuff starts to blur together. But on the first example, it does exactly that. It blurs together and nothing stands out. On the second example, you should still be able to identify the important elements, even when squinting at it. So the squint test is a really quick, non-scientific way to give your design a quick visual check and see if the hierarchy is working as you intended. On to tip 3 then, learn to love typography, or at least care about it a little bit. That's my kind of caveat for that. So good typography can be the difference between a good design and a great design. There's a lot to learn about typography, like far too much, and it really is. Typography and color I kind of lump together as the stuff that designers can do, that me with my technical background I'm not great at. But we're just going to give a quick overview of some of the key things to know about typography to help in your interface design. So a bit of the basics. A font usually consists of different weights. They can range from light all the way up to extra bold or heavy. Some fonts only have very limited weights, so it's important when you're choosing a font, check that it has the range of weights that you need, and really try and limit the number of fonts used in any project or any interface as well. 2 is more than enough. 3 at a push, but really 1 or 2 fonts tops, and actually 1 with just 2 distinctly different weights will give you a good contrast as well. So don't need to go wild on that. And when selecting a font, there are thousands out there. So how do you go about picking one? I guess first check if there's a brand font for use in the project that you're working on. And if not, you just want to pick one which is kind of legible and can be used in the tool you're using, etc. So some things to consider when selecting a font is the sort of personality of that font. Should it, we have like traditional fonts, quirky fonts, contemporary fonts, and they're often described as well. So just making sure that it fits with the brand, the tone of voice for the particular project you're working on. And then you compare fonts. You can go for kind of a more decorative one for headings potentially, and something simpler for your sort of paragraph text. And then you also want to be considering the legibility. So if you pick a great font, but then you scale it right down to quite a small font size, is it still legible? Can you still read it? And then we've talked about visual hierarchy, but we want to include a typographic hierarchy as well. So we need to think about what are our main titles, what size should they be, and what weight should they have, subtitles, body text, and so on. And defining that will help get really good consistency across your typography in your interface too. And another couple of points is all caps or not. So large passages of text, paragraphs are difficult to read if you go for all caps, but it looks neat for labels or titles or kind of shorter, 1 word, 2 word, 3 words. It can look quite nice, but also check on the contrast as well when you're thinking about typography. So the word small on the right hand side there, within the light blue shaded area, the contrast isn't sufficient there. It's not great on the word big either. Obviously, the best contrast comes from having black on light blue in that situation. Okay, right, quick demo. Leap back into Squirrel. One second. Trackpad has decided not to play ball. There we go. So let's open up starting file. We don't care about that one. So what I've got here, let me just get rid of that grid a second, is some text. Nothing really wrong. So a couple of grouped items. So the typographic hierarchy has already been considered here. We've got headers, we've got subtitles. But how can we tidy this up a little bit? I just copy those elements over here. We can already see we've got an issue with alignment, so we're just going to line those up. This is all dark. This is all black text on white, so we need to consider contrast, and it can be a bit easier on the eyes if we can change the contrast slightly with these ones. So we're just going to go in here, and rather than have it be the stark contrast of absolute black on white, I'm just going to change that for like a dark grey. Do that across each of those. All the threes will do for me for a dark grey. And then I'm thinking we can probably go bold to give that a bit of a better hierarchy or typographic hierarchy, but I'm also going to knock that back, I think, as it's not the most important thing that we're looking at. We'll probably take that down. Maybe somewhere like that. And then I think this is one of those cases where adding caps could help. So I think that looks a little bit neater, that kind of block of text on the right, and I would then go back and I'd update my style guide to reflect that typographic hierarchy. But hopefully you can see that looks a little bit better. Right, tip 4, understanding affordance. So what is affordance? You've probably heard the term affordance mentioned before. There's a huge subject in its own right, but basically affordance is the visual characteristics of a thing that indicate its functionality or use. So if we take our heads out of the digital space for a second, it will help us to understand why affordance is so important. Let's think about a real world object like a door. We come across doors all the time. A door can be opened, but how a user of that door tries to open it depends on the visual cues or affordances that the door has. So if a door has a handle, you intuitively expect to pull it, or if it has a flat plate, you try and push it. And if you see a doorknob, you'll try and turn it. So the way a thing looks can influence how the user tries to interact with it before they have even started to interact with it. And this applies to digital interfaces too. We can see here all of these are buttons, all of these are links, all of these are toggles, but by increasing the affordance on these, we help to influence how that user is going to interact with it. So for example, the adding, kind of that just looks like text. By the time we get to this end of the scale, it's very obvious that this thing is clickable, pushable, something is going to happen as a result. And it's about finding the right balance. So I'm not sure I would necessarily go all the way to this end of the scale in all these cases, but it really depends on the context that you're using it in. And then when something has good affordance, you know immediately what it does and how to use it without even thinking about it. It just feels natural and intuitive. So that's the reason for considering this in the first place and understanding affordance. There are things called false affordances. So if you get an affordance wrong on something, that can be really confusing. A false affordance is when it has visual cues that suggest a certain behavior, but it actually functions in a completely different way to how users expect. Take our example of the door. How often have you gone to pull open a door to discover you need to push it? You assumed it was pulled because the handle suggested that was its function. It's not only confusing, but it's frustrating too. And you can add additional signifiers, as they call them, so adding the word push, but that doesn't really help. You're still going to naturally try and pull that door. There was a hotel that I visit once a year on a conference that I go to, and I'm forever trying to push the number instead of the what is actually the button to the right hand side of it. But because the number it's circular, and I've learned now, but I always used to kind of try and push that number and think that was the button to go up in the lift or the elevator. And then false affordances inside an interface, what do they look like? So it could be a text link where it's actually just underlined text, but that looks like a hyperlink. We've got text inside of a rectangle looking like a button. Left aligned text inside of a white rectangle with a border like that looks like an input field, but it's not. And then kind of an interactive pie chart where one segment is exploded, but you can't actually click on that. It was kind of just illustrative. So if we leap back into Squirrel ever so quickly, what can we do to help inside of our interfaces using no-code tools like Squirrel? So I've got, for example, a text input field here and a button. And currently, if I go and run that, it actually lets me hit the submit button before I've even entered anything. So we can help our users out a little bit here by saying actually only make the button available to be clicked if some text has been entered. So if we do something here like if this is where I shall type it wrong, I'm sure it is blank. Let's go A1. So if A1 is blank, then 1 else 0. Then we get an error. Because I can't type. Okay, perfect. And then if we wire this button here up, we've got an option in here to disable it when. So we're going to say disable this button when that option there is equal to 1, as essentially that means nobody has entered any text. If we quickly go and check that, as soon as we enter something, we're now able to submit. And if there's nothing in there, we can't. So that's us basically helping that user out in that circumstance. If you don't have that sort of programmatic way of controlling it, a very simple thing you can do is to add, let's think, if we took something like a slider here, which is interactable, but you didn't want somebody to be able to interact with that, we don't have the same properties to disable when on this one. So we could do something like block that mouse interaction in this scenario. Put some fill on, take the border off, take that down to about 75. So it looks grayed out at that point, and then we can basically hide that rectangle. Show this component when right, so the component needs to be there when there's no text entered and gone when some text is entered. There we go. So same sort of trick. And then the last of our tips is about picking the right UI element. So let's have a look. I'm running a little bit over here, so we'll fly through these and see how we go. So basically, patterns. Pay attention to the UI patterns that are out there. So users are going to expect things to behave or work a certain way based on unconscious UI patterns. So these are patterns they've come across using apps, systems that they're interacting with on a regular basis. So they are recurring solutions to a problem is the best way to describe them. So something like the hamburger menu, the pattern for ellipsis for kind of like more in terms of menu options. We want to make sure we avoid breaking UI patterns. So radio buttons, for example, should be mutually exclusive. So we shouldn't see a scenario, or we shouldn't put into our interfaces something where somebody can choose 2 options from a radio button. That's not how that's designed to work and would be confusing for the user. Drop downs. Use a drop down when you don't need to see all the items in one go. If you've got 7 or more items, maybe consider adding a search or filtering into that drop down, and use them when you want to recommend or suggest an item potentially, because you can have one pre-selected. Radio buttons, we touched on them just now. Use when you need to emphasize all the options in one go, so have all those options be visible. Use them for 5 or less options, and when the number of options is fixed because of screen real estate problems, if they could grow or get bigger. And when visibility and a quick response are a priority. Checkboxes, use them when something is Boolean. And by Boolean, we mean yes or no, not binary, as in something is going fast or something is going slow. That would be more suited to a radio button or a toggle. And you can use them to when you've got related items, because you can group things together, as I've done with the example for hobbies there. So groups or collections work well with checkboxes as long as there's an on-off option for them. And give it, if it's a single item for a checkbox, give it an actionable label. So for example, show legend, if you were displaying a legend on a chart. Toggles, use these for Booleans as well, for on-off, but do it when the response should be instant to the decision. So they don't need to kind of submit or make a load of preferences and then hit submit. It's more about I turn it on and that is an immediate action. And then buttons, use these when you want to initiate an action, and also consider the states as well. So going back to affordance, we need to be mindful of making sure that a button looks like a button, and thinking about hover states, selected states, press states, etc. So, and also on buttons, you want to be thinking about if there's multiple of them, primary and secondary states for them. So you're kind of guiding the user towards the main action, that primary action that you want them to take. I had a demo for buttons prepared. I think we may not have time for that. We'll come back to it if we do. So basically, rule of thumb, if the option is Boolean, it's a checkbox or a toggle. If the number of options is between 2 to 4, radios work well. If they've got a lot of text, radios also work well, because you can stack them, have them arranged vertically with the text running off to the right. If there's lots of options, use a drop down. And if there's really lots of options, drop down with search added to it. If it's a choice between immediate actions, then a button is the best way to represent that. So really, well, it comes back to my idea of through all my roles, I've always tried to simplify things. So we want to keep the design simple. Simple doesn't mean basic or undesigned. It just means considered design. So having a solid rationale behind every decision for every design element on the page, really. So that's kind of like the final or parting thought, I guess. Mark, kind of back to you.
Thank you very much, Mel. That was excellent. Some really, really good stuff there. And we now all understand affordance. And I, for one, was certainly squinting at the screen during the one of the demos. We do have a couple of questions. One is on buttons, actually. So that might be helpful for your demo. It says, it hasn't got a name. Anonymous attendee says, "Hi, Mel. Can you customize a button component to add an image or an icon?"
So within Squirrel, currently, no is the simple answer. But what you can do is you can lay an image component over the top of your button and make sure that mouse events, there's an option to say that mouse events should work below it. So you don't block mouse events, you kind of let that click go through. So that's a workaround, but actually with my Squirrel kind of UX head on and product management and design head on, then it's something that we're looking to add the ability to be able to pick from an icon library and add it to the button. So and as you saw from some of my examples, it actually helps a lot to have icons on buttons in terms of making it easier for people to understand their function.
Great stuff. And whoever it was who asked that question, if they want to email us, email support@squirrel365.io, ask that question again. We'll send you a Squirrel project with examples of buttons that have images as them, so we can show the workaround that Mel talks about. Another question from Ziv, actually a question from Ziv, and he asks, what are the plans to support custom fonts within Squirrel?
That's another great question. There are plans to support custom fonts. Actually, from myself and the design team have done quite a lot of work already on what kind of like additional font selection capabilities and possibly even theming and the idea of fonts associated with themes look like in Squirrel. So we've quite a long way down the road of designing that out. And then we've got an interim, breaking news this is, we've got a kind of an interim solution coming in the short term in the next Builder Squirrel, which should allow people to be able to modify basically a behind the scenes way of updating a file, which will add more fonts into the Squirrel interface to be used. But we're working on a nicer solution. But yes, there will, coming in the next build is a mechanism for doing it.
Great stuff. Fantastic. Well, it's great to hear. Thank you so much, Mel, for your time today. Thank you all for taking the time out of your diary to join us on this live event. We have recorded it, as we said at the start, and that will be available to you in an email very shortly. If you're new to Squirrel, or you like the look of the design experience that was demoed with via Mel's demonstrations, then please, if you want a deep dive, we're happy to arrange that. There's a button in the email that comes out to you. Just click that. You'll be able to pick a time slot that works with you, and we'll happily do a deep dive and go into further details of what Squirrel can do for you and your organization. Thank you all so much. Mel, thank you again, and hope everyone has a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks all. Bye.